Hey, it's Jack, Jack in the attic. And if you have any yarn dyeing experience, this one's gonna be kind of a painful watch. So first thing, there are wildfires just southwest of us, so everyone in my household woke up gunky, and so this is just how I'm gonna sound today, which is not that different from usual, but boy howdy, it does not feel good. Second thing, I am gonna yap for a not insignificant amount of time before showing the dyeing process. Some people enjoy this and some people are annoyed by it, so I'm gonna really urge you to exercise your free will on this one. Use it as sort of a choose your own adventure moment. So you're welcome to skip ahead. You will miss a bit of context, but if you're not bothered by that, I'm not bothered by that. So I have watched so many yarn dyeing videos, I can't even start to list YouTube channels that I recommend because I've watched everything I could find. And it turns out everyone has a different method. So it was actually kind of hard to determine the correct order of operations to achieve what I wanted to achieve with yarn dyeing. I got a lot of good information, but maybe too much information, you know? So this is absolutely not a tutorial. This is just for fun because I wanted to try yarn dyeing. So that's it. My actual method does not involve measuring. It's just vibes based, really. I didn't pay any sort of mind to like the concept of depth of shade aside from just like adding more dye based on how things were looking in the moment. I used a rusty old baby spoon to measure everything. I'm pretty sure in the video I said I found it in my couch, which is true, but I had more of a think about this spoon, and I'm pretty sure I do know where it actually came from, and that would be the ground of my local Renaissance festival when I was a child actor. And then it got lost in my couch for like 15 years, and then I found it. Super important to not use anything that you would ever use for food for yarn dye. You don't want to contaminate things in that way, so why not use a rusty baby spoon from the ground? I did learn a lot from this experiment, and I have continued to learn more in the past couple of weeks since I recorded the bulk of this video, all of the actual yarn dyeing. So you will see times when I use too much dye or not enough dye, or times when I sadly like dump out some perfectly good dye because I didn't plan things out well enough, and there are times when the yarn stayed in the dye bath for like not nearly enough time or probably way too much time. There are a lot of issues, errors. I also now understand a lot more about like when and how to add the acid and heat and how much acid to add to produce the desired effect. There was a pretty major issue in the first skein I dyed where the dye was striking, and it is called striking, where the dye actually adheres to and dyes the yarn. It's called striking. I called it basically everything else I could think of in the video because I couldn't remember the word, but strikes. So the dye was striking before I could like really squish it into the yarn and move it around. So I ended up with a lot of blank spots that needed to be fixed, and I think I used too much acid on that one too, so that's why the dye was striking so fast. I corrected that in the second skein, so you will see that. So even with all of these like technical errors, I still really love the outcome. So don't take this as me being like discouraged in any sort of way. I think it's great that I can not even mess up necessarily, but that I can just do something very vibes based and kind of intuitive and just mess around and still come up with something that I really enjoy. I will use the kitchen scale next time, however, so that should help. Yarn dyers are absolutely welcome to correct me on anything I get incorrect, especially safety things, like things that are going to be really important to get the correct information out there. I feel like I talked about safety as much as I felt confident in saying. So I do ask that you watch the whole video first before making corrections, just because I make some of my own corrections in this process. There kind of seem to be very few hard and fast rules outside of the basic safety elements, but I know there are some great and very experienced yarn dyers in my audience, and I will absolutely take suggestions. I welcome that. So with all of that said, let's get into the dyeing process. Welcome to my extremely casual kitchen with the really bad lighting. I'm doing something kind of creative with using like 6 different light sources just to avoid using the overhead light. Is there a tiny flying insect in here, or is it dust? Or a ghost? Anyway, don't worry about the lighting. It's not going to be like this the entire time. But here's my setup, basically. And actually, here's what I did last night. Okay. So I did some practice on these minis. I am actually kind of thrilled with how they came out. The thing about minis though is they fit in my pot. 2 or 3 of them fit in my pot. Here's my pot. The stove's not on. I feel like my pot is huge, but it is not. And on camera it looks just that much smaller, but it's cauldron shaped and I love it so much, and this is my dedicated dye pot forever. So these, I am loving the way these colors came out. This is 3 different jacquard dyes, acid dyes. I'll show you those. Now I did already mix these dyes with water in tiny little jars so that I can use them safely without a mask, so that I can talk through what I'm doing on camera. I just used a KN95 because you don't want to inhale these. So I have black and chartreuse and golden ochre. So just these 3 colors I'm using today because they're what I purchased. I looked at them and I was like, I can make something fugly with that. So in addition to the dyes and the pot, I have this clip on the side of the pot that I can kind of lay things on when I need to. I have dedicated dye tongs that I do not use for food. I obviously don't use the pot for food either. No food things here. See, the clip is good for that. The other thing I have is a jar of water to rinse my spoon, and a spoon that I absolutely never ever will ever use for food. So this is, it's wet. This is a rusty baby spoon with a duck on it. I found this in my couch several years ago, so wasn't gonna use this for food, and it's like about a teaspoon, so I'm doing about a teaspoon measurements, or about half a teaspoon measurements a lot of the time. The other things I have are citric acid, which I got at the like fancy grocery store. Not fancy, I got at the like natural foods, whatever grocery store. I have already added a little bit of this to each of the little dye jars and some to the pot as well, which has maybe like 3/4 of an inch of water in it, and I already added some black dye to this as well. So the experiments I did with the minis last night. Oh, and gloves. I have gloves. I didn't end up really needing them in my experiments with the minis, but it's not worth risking it. I have gloves. I dye my hair. I baby my bang. I pluck eyebrow. I do nails. I have gloves, and I'm gonna use them because I have them. I also have off camera the spot with all my dye jars covered with a black towel. I should probably do more than that, but that's jazz. I would always recommend taking more precautions rather than fewer. Do you like all my knives back here? Don't ask me about my experience with Cutco, please. Everyone was 18 once, right? So, talking about the yarn. Last night, the minis, I used Knit Picks Merino Style DK. However, today I'm going to be dyeing the Knit Picks Swish Fingering Weight, which is, I just threw that. which is 100% superwash merino. I did not realize that this is not superwash at all. They didn't have minis available of Swish when I was making my little purchases, so I kind of just got whatever. I'm glad it was merino, so I have like kind of an idea of how this is going to react. I didn't realize it wasn't superwash, so oh well. So in this bowl, which I also do not use for food ever, this is for crafts, really. I have already soaked one of these skeins of the Swish fingering weight, and I added one extra long loop of this cotton yarn. Since it's cotton, it won't really get dyed by the acid dyes. It only works on like protein fibers and nylon for some reason. I'm learning I don't really know anything about nylon. Whatever. So this has been soaked for, I'd say, a little over an hour. I'm still kind of unclear on where you're supposed to put citric acid and where you're not. So in my experiments with the minis, it kind of ended up everywhere, and this time it's kind of everywhere. I understand that the more citric acid you add, the faster the dye is going to adhere to the yarn, and so sometimes the dye adhering really quickly can be a good thing, sometimes it's not exactly what you want. I don't have all the answers. It's in the title. This is my first time dyeing yarn. The experience as a whole is my first time. I'm not counting the minis as like a separate experience. You get it. So this is already soaked. There was a little bit of citric acid in that water, a little bit of citric acid in the bath, and a little bit in each of the individual dye jars. So hopefully that is not too much. Anyway, my plan is this. So the pot is completely cold, has dye water in it already. I'm going to put the yarn in it because in addition to citric acid, you also need heat for the dye to adhere to the yarn. So while it's cold, I'm going to put the yarn in, smoosh it around so that some of it is sticking up out of the water, some of it is submerged, then bring the heat up slowly. The other thing is you don't want to shock the yarn. It could possibly felt if you expose it to really hot or really cold. If you expose it to like opposite temperatures or really hot temperatures, less so with superwash, but still, I don't want to take the risk if I don't have to. So I'm going to put the yarn in, I'm going to smoosh it around with gloves on, and then I'm going to bring the heat up, and then I'm going to start adding other dyes in. So let's go. Angle change time? Let's see if I can figure that out. Okay, you would not believe how precarious my camera setup is right now. Also, I put my hair up, so I'm sorry if the angle changes multiple times. I also don't know where the lens is because I think the camera's upside down. Anyway, let's go. Gloves. Gloves first. Okay, I also put an old cutting board that I don't use under this towel so that I can safely set down my tongs out of frame. Like a plastic tray or something would be sick. I thought I had one, like an old Halloween one from the dollar store, but I don't think I have it anymore. So, old cutting board. It's not good for cutting. It was, honestly, it was for Instagram food pictures, and I don't do that anymore. Anyway, so this is cold. We're gonna put the yarn in now and then turn the heat up. So ideally the dye shouldn't start adhering until I have the yarn where I want it. Okay, so I smooshed out as much of the water as I could. How do I want to do this? Illegal angel hair pasta. Now I want to turn the whole thing, or I'll just move the clip. I want to have a good amount of yarn kind of sticking out on the top so that I can dye that with other colors, but I do want this to be mostly black with some other colors. So I want to make sure it's not too uniform. Is this maybe a little more dye than I wanted? Okay, so it turns out that was just a little bit more water than I wanted in the pot, so I got rid of some of that. And now this is looking good. It is already kind of turning blue, but I think with the combination of colors that I have, that is not going to be a problem, because this is what happened with the minis last night, and I really like how that turned out. So I'm turning this onto like low, medium, low. It's going to take several minutes to get to the point of being kind of steamy, but not simmering. You should see some steam coming up. I say you should. I don't know what I'm talking about. If you want like an actual tutorial, this is not it. But from what I understand, it should be kind of steamy, but not simmering, not boiling. Okay, so did I already mess everything up? I don't know. Let's find out. Okay, so I think we're almost there. I'm seeing little bits of steam, but not a ton. So I want to talk about the plan a little bit more while this is finishing getting up to temperature. So I bought 4 skeins of undyed yarn in this same base. So I'm planning to do 2 this way and 2 in the more, I guess, traditional low immersion way, where it's just a tiny bit of water in the pot. And before I say anything further, I recognize this is not the correct vessel for the type of dye that I'm trying to do. Ideally, I would have a long rectangular one that sits across 2 burners so I could lay the yarn down like next to each other and do multiples at a time. But I'm just doing this for fun, and I'm not really looking to invest that heavily into this at the moment. However, it is really fun, so I don't know, we'll see. But that's why you're not usually going to see low immersion dyeing in a pot like this, and this is not that low. Point is, I'm gonna do 2 like this, or as close to this as I can make it. It would be a lot easier to make matching skeins if I could do 2 at a time. And then 2 where I put the yarn into just water without any dye in it and then add dyes on top. That's how I made the 2 minis. This is just a hunch, kind of. So on the minis, I did get a fair amount of color mixing, and so I have some blue spots, some spots where I didn't really get enough dye in there, but it kind of turned some of the golden ochre into like closer to a brown, and it definitely made the chartreuse into a greener green, if that makes any sense. So that's why I'm not worried about this like light blue color that's coming through. It's not what I intended to do, but based on how the minis went, I think it's going to be fine. And if not, I love black yarn, who cares? So with the black on the bottom and then having 3 colors, one of which being black, I'm intending for this to be mostly black with little spots of the green and the golden color. So fingers crossed. I think it's time. Yeah, I'm seeing consistent steam. Ooh, maybe actually a little bit of bubbling, so I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Okay, so I am slightly concerned that this section over here has more dark than the rest of the yarn, so I'm trying to push little pieces down, but I also have this jar of black dye, so I shouldn't actually be that concerned. I should be more concerned about making sure enough is sticking up. I love figuring this out in real time. One thing I didn't mention, have a dedicated dye, like hand towel nearby in case of any drips, in case your hands get wet and you need to dry them off. I play kind of fast and loose with my dish towels, so I've already ruined. I have dyed 2 of them colors they're not supposed to be so far with just fabric dye. So this feels kind of high stakes. Like I could mess up a lot if I tried or if I didn't try. But I guess I've been dyeing fabric, just clothing, for long enough that I'm pretty careful with the actual parts that could go terribly wrong, you know? Anyway, let's start doing stuff. So I'm gonna go from lightest to darkest color, and I'm kind of unsure whether the golden ochre or the chartreuse are actually darker, but I know that on top of this base, the chartreuse is going to become that like kind of light foresty green. So this is definitely the lightest. Do you see how that just splashed on my hand? Great. Okay, so I'm just gonna add little bits here and there. I only added a little bit of water to these little jars so that this would be fairly concentrated. I'm glad this isn't a too high temperature activity so that I can kind of put my hand in the pot without being super worried. If I touched this pot right now, it wouldn't be comfortable, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. Can you see me overthinking this right now in real time? The edges of the pot I have trouble getting the spoon into. I would like to get one of the plastic like medicine syringes from the drugstore before I do this again. All right, so is that not enough or is that way too much? There's no way to know. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the chartreuse because I want this to be more chartreuse than the other color, so let's go crazy. Let's not go crazy. I'm not super worried about putting too much of these colors in because I know that the black dye will cover a lot of that up. So I'm kind of just any visible spot I'm trying to put chartreuse on. I'm realizing I might have to mix up some more. I did use hot water when I mixed these dyes and they cooled down quite a bit in the process, so they're just kind of warm now, which I guess is good since I have to handle them. Yeah, I might have to mix up some more. Kind of hard to tell what's going on in that dark side of the pot. Okay, that was all the chartreuse. Maybe I should have made a little bit more. You know what? That's okay, because I'm still adding black on top of this. Let me go ahead and smoosh this around a little bit. I want to try to get the dye kind of into the spaghetti pile. After this is all set, I will flip this around and make sure that I really cover everything. I just wanted to see what color the water was. I know as the dye gets absorbed, what I guess we're looking for is for the dye water to be exhausted, for it to have absorbed as much as possible, and then it's not clear, but it clears up. It's not like clean water, but it will be a lot clearer than we began with, and that is already starting to happen. More over here than over here, so maybe I'll spin it so that the heat is even. Also, my stovetop is kind of lopsided. Ooh, a lot of steam came up when I did that, so that was probably, that needed to happen, I guess. All right, I'm gonna go in with the more concentrated black and fill in some of those spots. I did make more of the black dye than the other colors, which I hope was wise. This part is scary. I'm like, I could just cover up all of the good color work I just did. So I don't want to cover all of the color, but I don't want these light blue spots either, you know? So something that I found encouraging but not at all helpful was the fact that in watching a million different yarn dyeing videos for weeks before doing this, everyone seems to have a different method. And that's great because it means I can't be that wrong in my method, you know? But it also means I also cannot be correct. So that's kind of a bummer. For being a creative person, for being a maker in my heart and soul, I love when there is a pattern. I love when there are rules. I love when I know what I'm supposed to be doing. turning again so I can kind of access this side a little easier. I'm gonna turn the overhead light on real quick, and it's gonna make everything look really yellow. Sorry, but that feels like the smart choice right now to be able to see the whole pot. Oh, wait. This is totally fine. Hey, so I should have had the light on the whole time. Next time. Cool. It's not only my first time dyeing yarn, but my first time having this kind of lighting challenges. Okay. So now that the lights are on and I know that this is kind of looking how I want it to look, I'm feeling a little better. One thing I didn't expect, even though it's really what I saw in all of these videos, is that the dye kind of stays where you put it. That's nice. I mean, there's obviously some bleeding because it's in a pot of water, but there's not as much control as I want in this particular method, but there's more control than I expected, so that's nice. Gonna go ahead and smoosh these around again. I know when I flip it over, there's gonna be plenty of little spots that I still need to cover, and that's fine. I am opening my heart to the idea of not being that good at this, and that's challenging for me. I want to be the best at everything without having to try that hard. What's so wrong about that? I also kind of like these like lighter kind of gray spots, so not mad at that. Okay, put everything down. Stop touching everything for a minute. I'm gonna just leave it for like 5 minutes, make sure all the dye really gets absorbed, and I will be back when I flip this around. Okay, so I walked away for several minutes, and then I checked on it a few times. Whatever, it's been sitting for a while. The water is definitely not clear. It's like a dark blue, but it is translucent. Like I can tell there's like black pigment particles. What am I trying to say? I feel like it's soaked up as much as it's going to from this. So while it doesn't look correct, and I don't I don't feel that confident, it's time to flip these Haunted Swamp noodles, so let's get going. Ooh. So this was a pretty thick pile of noodles. Actually, water doesn't look too bad. Anyway, this yarn in this pot was pretty thick, so I didn't expect to cover every little bit of yarn on that first pass. Why do I keep just ignoring where the clip is? I can move the clip, whatever. All right, so not as dark on this side as I expected, but maybe that's good, because I can just add a bunch of black on this side. That should be easy enough. And that'll cover all these little bits that didn't really get much. So I'm trying to bring any light sections, any too light sections, to the top that I see, so that I can really get in there. Wow, it's crazy how this pile of wet string doesn't want to just like cooperate 100% with me without some like experience and practice. That's rude. Okay, so I am joking. This looks cool. I'm excited. So I'm gonna go back in with the black that I already have mixed up, and then I'm gonna use the rest of this like teeny little bit of the golden ochre. And if I need to mix up more chartreuse, I will, but there's so much of it on the other side that I think I'm just gonna leave it as it is. So I might even add a little bit more water to the remaining black, because this is already not like super dark, but it already has some black pigment in it. So if I can stretch this, that would be great. So I added not a lot of water, maybe a tablespoon to this. And what I'm trying to avoid is a lot of like denim-y color, because that's not for me. A little bit of it in there looks cool. I like it on the mini. I just don't want that to be the primary color of this yarn. I'm going to be the #1 world's top consumer of jacquard black acid dye. I'm going to run out of this tiny container immediately. I also have to be totally okay with the fact that this is not going to be like the darkest solid black in the world. I feel like I could make that happen. There are plenty of spots that are definitely solid black on the minis. But for the concept here, it's just like not that realistic, because it's going to be mixed together in a bunch of places. Well, I'm getting down to my last little bits. I'm trying to do this strategically. That wasn't very strategic. Okay, so that's the last of the black dye. Any of these lighter bits, I'm going to see what I can cover with the golden ochre, and then that's just going to be how it is. That is just the end of that, because I'm not mixing up more dye for a single skein experiment. I feel like I'm already using more dye than I'm seeing other people use. I would recommend not just like dunking your whole hand into the pot like I'm doing. Okay, that's absolutely not going to do anything. So, smoosh this around. This still looks really blue. Is that the light? That's the light. Okay, great. This is some reflection. I don't actually know where that's coming from. Well, that doesn't help you. Okay. No, that's nothing. Okay. Just waving my hands in front of the camera. That's helpful. Okay, I'm gonna let this sit on the heat for a few minutes, and then I will come back, assess the situation, see if it needs more time, and if not, I will be ready to take it out of the pot and give it a rinse. And I'll show you the wet rinsed yarn, but it's not gonna look like much. Okay, so I lied. I mixed up more black. I'm going back in. It's just too blue, and I won't allow it. Sorry if you can hear my stove just like struggling. Oh my god, I just hear geese outside yelling. Raise your hand in the comments if you have ever been attacked by a goose, because I have. Tell me in the comments how many birds you've been attacked by. And if it's more than 3, you win. Because I think it's 3 for me. It might be more. I don't know. I have this thing where birds don't like me. And I have to stress, I love minding my business. I just realized I didn't move the clip, and it's totally fine. So maybe the clip is superfluous. That's fine. Okay. So I'm also trying to remind myself that I put so much color on the other side with the like knowledge that a lot of that was going to be covered up. That was an intentional choice to make sure there were no like really blank spots. And now I'm like, oh no, what if I cover up the color? Yeah, man, you were gonna do that. That was the plan. That was part of the plan. Okay, this is looking correct. This is looking correct. I am going to leave this alone for a few minutes, and then I'm going to come back and actually rinse it for real this time, part 2. Okay, I'm done. I swear I'm done. I swear I'm not going to add any more. Well, I got a little bit more. No. No. Don't do it. Okay. Goodbye. So I've let this sit for quite a while. I really got mixed sort of messages on how long it needs to be heated. But I feel like I gave it plenty of time. Maybe even too much. Well, let's take it out. This is certainly more time than I left the minis in, but those are also a lot less yarn. It's looking promising. And the water doesn't look too bad. There's some pigment left in there, of course, but... Your pasta. Well, that's not good. This is hot. Oop. Okay, I'm gonna let this cool down, and then I'm gonna wash it, and then I'm gonna see how I feel about this like gray section, and maybe we'll start from the beginning. That would be unfortunate. I think these just take more dye than I expected them to. I'm not working with minis anymore. Okay, surprise, surprise, I'm back yet again. So, sorry, there are just more light spots than I want. And I know, I said earlier, that that was just going to be part of the design now, and I'm choosing to go with it and accept it, and then I realize I don't have to go with it and accept it. The whole point of this is being able to make what I want. What I have to accept is actually just the challenges of using stuff I already have at home instead of the appropriate tools. So I'm choosing to continue. So I have just the tiniest bit of water and a little bit of citric acid in here. I'm not adding citric acid to the dyes this time. That way they should have a little bit of extra time to disperse before adhering to the yarn. Because I think that's maybe part of what's causing these spots. I know it's more likely just too much yarn stacked up too high in a little pot. But I feel like it couldn't hurt as long as it's not 0 citric acid, right? Just less. Okay, so I'm gonna plop this in and then turn the heat on. I'm trying to get the light spots as exposed as possible so that that's what I can really focus on. But once it's in the pot, it's kind of hard to do that. So I didn't mix up any more black. I think it's dark enough. And I really want to let the chartreuse and what? I keep forgetting the name of this. Golden ochre. Gold ochre? It's gold ochre, and I keep calling it golden whatever. So let's get this heated up. And then I will be back once again to just like splash some colors around in a pot, not knowing what I'm doing. All right, let's go. Okay, so it is warming up. It is warm, but still like not so hot that I can't put my fingers in there, and I think that's gonna be necessary. So I'm gonna start putting dye in, squish it around with my fingers, and then let it finish heating up so that hopefully that means the dye can have time to like move around and get fully squooshed. So I have no more strategy. I'm just going in. I really need to clarify because of how my tone of voice is. I am not at all discouraged. I'm having the best time. Like, no, it's not going exactly how I planned, but why would it? I'm not a professional. So, no disappointment here. I just like I don't sound excited verbally. Vocally. So yeah, next time, or before next time, I will definitely pick up a plastic medicine syringe. Oh, we're bubbling too much there. So that I can really get the dye deep in there quickly. Okay, so that is getting too hot to put my fingers in. I still have the tongs if I need to move things around a little bit more. I'm just going to keep squishing for a minute to make sure everything's really saturated. Okay, that's the last of the dye, and that's gonna have to actually be the final time I mix up more dye and add more dye to this, just because it is taking so long. But I don't know, it's looking really cool. I'm gonna stop saying final time about anything because it's just not true. Okay, I'm back. It's been long enough that the stovetop isn't even hot anymore. So I'm pretty happy with this. I know there is still some light spots, but at least the light spots are gray. They're not white. They're not as blue as I was worried they would be. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this, especially since this is my first full skein ever, and I experimented with minis of a completely different yarn. So I'm gonna go hang this up to dry. I'm going to try to duplicate this look on a second skein of yarn. I have a lot of patterns for 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn, so just because this is an experiment doesn't mean I'm not going to use it, and I don't have a lot of 1 skein patterns that I would want to use this for, so we're making another one. I will not make you watch that. I think for the other 2 skeins, instead of a low immersion type of dye, I'm going to try to do a dip dye technique where I dye parts of the skein at a time. I still only have these 3 colors, so it's not going to be that crazy different. Actually, hold on. I technically did that with my 3rd mini last night, but instead of chartreuse and gold ochre and black, I got kind of dirty bumblebee. So this was an issue with the yarn not picking up all of the dye in the water, and so they mixed together. I think that's going to be less of an issue with a full skein of yarn, and I can just sort of be more aware of that and not let it happen. I can switch out the water in between if I need to. So I have ideas. So I will see you for the next dye experiment, and then obviously I will come back at the end and show all of the finished skeins dried and twisted back up into hank form. Okay, just wanted to give a quick update on the second skein of this same dye technique. It's looking, I think, a little bit better. I hope a little bit better. The only thing I have really changed is that every single time I place some dye with the spoon, I would like place it and then do this. So as I like scoot around in here and try to find blank spots, I'm really not finding them. I know that does not mean they're not there, but hopefully that's handling that issue a little bit better. I know this is gonna look different than the first skein because I am trying to switch things up to see what works best, but I'm still gonna use them together. I am not opposed to switching skeins every other row, it's fine. Another thing I should mention, earlier I did have the dye pots sitting here, the powder dyes. I have mentioned how important it is to wear a mask while you are working with those because you do not want to inhale it. You also do not want to get that powder on your cooking utensils, your straws and chopsticks, your salt container, I guess. Please know, they were sitting here just so that I could show them to the camera. I am mixing the dyes on the other side of the room, not by food prep. So I believe that's wise. I'm not going to necessarily tell you you have to do that, but I think that is a good idea. So you don't want to inhale it. You don't want it on anything you're ever going to use for cooking food. Just be super cautious. Okay, so that actually worked a lot better. So next time I'm definitely going to use that technique again. There are still some slightly lighter spots, but it's way better. And that took like a third of the time. So now I know you got to do the smooshing and the wiggling early on, like as soon as you put the dye in a spot. You gotta smoosh it in and wiggle it around so that it gets through the mass of yarn. Okay, cool. So that's actually very encouraging. That means I can do very small batches of this technique. That's great. Another thing is that I ended up with more already mixed dye left over. So we're doing the dip dye tonight. Didn't plan on that. So what I'm gonna do here, I'll heat up the yarn in just water, a little citric acid, and then I will take the yarn out, add dye, do the dip dyeing part, and then if it extracts all of the dye from the water, I will add the next dye. If not, I will stop and reassess, probably dump out the water and start that part over. How am I going to keep the yarn at the correct temperature? I have no idea. I will have some boiled water in the kettle ready to go, I guess. Other than that, I kind of don't have a strategy. So my only goal here is to not let the dyes mix with each other too much. So I'm really going to do like 3 separate dyes. Otherwise, I'm gonna end up with dirty bumblebee again. So this is hot. I'm gonna dump it out and then I'll come back. Okay, so I have my yarn soaking. I have heard people say to soak for at least 30 minutes. I have heard people say they soak overnight. I really get in there and swish around with my hands and try to make sure there are absolutely no dry spots and get all the air out of the yarn so it can absorb as much water as possible. But I don't think that is a flawless method. I don't think that means I don't need to give it some time. So I'll give it at least 30 minutes. I think 30 minutes is going to be fine because it's also going to need the heating up time before I take it out of the water. So I will see you then. Okay, hello and welcome back to slightly more of my kitchen. The yarn is hot. My god, I do not like the smell of hot, wet wool. No one warned me about that. I mean, I guess I kind of knew from blocking projects, but this is much worse. So anyway, I've been thinking a lot about the order of the colors because I'm pretty sure last time doing the yellow-orange, the gold ochre first, mixed with everything else and made everything kind of brown. So I am going to do that one first, but only so I can dump out the water after that, start over. I have boiled water in a kettle right off screen. I'm steaming up, my glass is hovering here. So I'm going to do the yellow first, dump it, and then come back and do the green and then the black. So that's my plan. I'm going to do gold on one side, like one end of the folded over hank, and then the green on the other side of the folded over hank, and then black on the center. You'll kind of see what I mean in a minute. So I've already mixed up the dye in water so that it would be not in dangerous powder form. So I'm gonna go ahead and add it. This already has citric acid in it. I have no idea if that's too much or not nearly enough. I have never dyed 2 skeins of yarn. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing a very fancy spaghetti swirling technique. Those are not quite even. Okay, there we go. So I really want to dunk maybe just like a few inches of the bottom, and it did not roll up evenly. I'm gonna see if I can try that again. Oh, the strings they're on aren't even, duh. Okay, so it's kind of a mess down at the bottom, but this is the plan. It really does look like spaghetti. Plan is to just dunk the bottom few inches. Ta-da! So I can leave that sitting for a few minutes. Get that in there with the spoon. Okay, so do you see what I mean now about doing like one end in yellow and one end in green, and then I'll do the whole center portion in black? I hope that makes sense. I hope it works. The placement completely worked on the mini experiment, just not the colors themselves. So I have reason to believe this will work out just fine. I'm gonna let this sit for a few minutes. I'm going to go make sure my hot water is ready, and I'll be back. Okay, so I realized the water wasn't quite as hot as I thought it was, so I turned it up a bit and now it is like actually steaming. I wanted to make sure that it actually like really sets the dye into the yarn. So I've given it a few more minutes than I think I really needed to. And apparently I used way too much dye, so there's no way this pot is going to get exhausted of all of this dye. I am pleased to see the little bit of gradient there. That's nice. Slightly less pleased to see how did this happen? Is that where are you supposed to be? Okay, well, that's fine. No, now I have to make it consistent. If that piece belongs down there, it's gonna be yellow. Okay, so I'm going to move this aside into the bowl. I'm going to swap this water out. And I'm gonna try to scoot the cotton yarn loops that I added to these skeins to the opposite side, to the yellow side, so I do have to let it cool down a little bit. Okay, I'm back. Hot water, steaming. I was able to scoot the cotton strings around to the opposite side. I keep talking when this is not in frame, but it is extremely uneven. Like the first time I cut my hair in the bathroom, you know, in the back, it just, what's happening? So I'm not worried about that from like an end product perspective. I should have two gloves on. I have one glove on. Because the black is going to go in the center. It's going to cover some of that. The worst that could happen is part of it turns brown. So that's fine with me. Willing to accept that risk. So I'm going to roll these up again. I'm going to go ahead and put in the green dye. Now that I know that that was way too much yellow, maybe this is also way too much green. We'll find out. One thing I did differently here is I mixed the teeniest amount of black into this green dye. By that I mean I like dunked the spoon in the black dye, shook it off, and then mixed it in with the green. So the tiniest amount. I just really like the color of where they overlap, so I thought I might like it just a smidge darker. I see why it's coming out super uneven. I don't know what can be done to prevent that, so I'm just embracing it. I'm sure, like, having a real method would help, instead of just, well, I roll it up on some tongs. Yes, this is more of the yarn dunked into the green than there was dunked into the yellow. That is fine. I would like a little bit more green than yellow. So same deal here. I'm gonna let this sit for a few minutes and then I'll be back. This soaked up so much of that green so quickly. Like, kind of remarkable how clear this water is. It's still obviously tinted a little bit green, but it's pretty clear. So I'm gonna try to just sort of get everything on the tongs. I think the dipping into the black dye is gonna be a little bit more involved. I forgot the camera was still on. Okay, so here's my... I don't even know what this looks like, but the important part is it's all on the tongs and the undyed section is ready to dunk. So after I do the main dunk, I will go back in with each skein individually and try to dunk little sections up here that didn't get much black dye. But right now I'm just gonna do a big dunk, and I'm not worried about this little bit of leftover green in the water. I actually may need to add a little bit more water because it's gotten a little bit low, but this is a lot of black dye. Yeah. So is this the part I'm most nervous about? Yes. But again, I'm not worried about covering up some of the yellow. A lot of the yellow, honestly. Yeah, this does need more water. I went ahead and heated up some more just in case. Yeah. Oh, the green and white looks like cabbage or like a leek. Oops, something happened there. This one Needs to be dunked in a little bit more to match the other one. Yeah, you see what I mean? How I'm gonna have to go in and like get that section. And that's totally fine. Okay, so this is the setup. I'm gonna hold this for a couple more minutes, and then I'm gonna come back and sort of clean up the areas where I can't dunk it because it's not perfectly even. So I will be back. Okay, so the one thing I didn't expect to happen happened, and it is the fact that even though this water still looks so dark, it's starting to get a little translucent, and these areas are not picking up anything from it. So I mixed up the tiniest bit more black dye, and that's going in. So the idea is that now I can sort of manipulate each side of the yarn independently. So if you think of this as quadrants, I can control the overlap of each one. I say as I struggle. So I can dunk just this part. Okay, yeah, that is working. That's picking up dye again. Try not to touch this while it's so hot, but I kind of have to. That looks good. Okay, so we're gonna do that on the other side. I think I accidentally muddied it a little bit up here by just grabbing it haphazardly. Ow, that's hot. Just turn this down a little bit. Okay. And that's about how much yellow I want left, so I'm not going to touch that side anymore. And I keep getting little black spots on the yellow. That's not ideal. Uh-oh. Okay, same thing on this side. Want that little bit of overlap. Did I mention I should be wearing 2 gloves? Why did I only grab 1 glove? What did I think I was going to be doing? And then this side's already pretty good, but I'm going to get a little bit extra. Okay, I'm going to do that same thing with the other skein, just so I can kind of get that gradient. And then I'll be back when I'm rinsing them, or after they're rinsed, because that's the last step. Okay, so this actually turned out quite nearly how I was expecting it to. What is going on up there? So there are some spots where it's definitely not black, it's gray, but that's okay. So the idea for this concept was that anything you knit with it would be mainly black, and then some like little pops of yellow and slightly bigger pops of green in there, and I think this accomplishes that. I mean, there will be some gray. I think my favorite part is the gradient in the green. I think that looks really cool. And my least favorite part is where I got this yellow kind of darty. But I don't know, I still think it looks cool. So the real question now is, where in the world am I going to hang this to dry, because I already have 2 skeins hanging up in the one creative place I could think of. So I won't make you stick around for my problem solving. I will see you tomorrow when these are dry. Okay, we're back. So here is the outcome. I think I already showed you the mini skeins, which turned out like this. I do have a 3rd mini skein that I have just been throwing a lot of dye at, and it doesn't really look like anything now. so I'm not gonna go get it, but here are the 2 mini skeins from my very first yarn dyeing experiment. This is what I wanted to replicate on 2 of the full-size skeins. So those turned out like this. I'm so pleased. Don't mind the loose loops. I didn't hank this up too terribly well. It's the second one. These do absolutely have their differences. They were dyed at different times, you know, but I think they go together really well. I would definitely alternate skeins. Not if, I will alternate skeins when I use these 2 together. And I think that'll be great. There are definitely some spots where things are still a little bit light. There's definitely not as much black as I expected. There definitely is some. But yeah, all of the like imperfections included, I love this yarn. I think it looks so cool. So the second skeins, I will put in a picture of what they looked like before I overdyed them off camera. So that was great and fun and very bright and neon, but the more I looked at them, the more I just wasn't really feeling it for me, you know? So I got some new dye in the mail, not for this yarn or anything, but for other skeins. And I did end up overdyeing the second 2 skeins in a few spots. So the yellow, I ended up trying to muddy it a little bit with a very diluted gray dye, and I darkened the green gradient with a darker green dye. I think they are much more me now. I have to kind of unhank this to show the green gradient. There's still neon green, but it's just a little bit more depth now. So at the expense of maybe being somewhat less exciting, they're definitely something I'm more likely to use. I did go with 2 and 2 because I have several 2 skein projects that I'm looking at right now. I will absolutely be using these in projects. Geese. Geese everywhere. I don't intend to ever dye more yarn than I can use myself and or give to friends. I would love to do like custom dyes for friends. That would be awesome. I do not want to be a small business. I do not want to become a professional yarn dyer. That is not the goal here. I'm just having a good time. And I will literally never stop buying from indie yarn dyers. That's not the goal either. But wow, it's like so convenient and economical to have my own hand-dyed yarn. It's just fun and cool. So kind of reflecting on the process, I am kind of confused and simultaneously relieved to report that some of the concepts I saw in some like yarn dyeing videos from professionals have only started to click now after I've had some hands-on experience, which is not super helpful in the moment, but it's good to have that better understanding now. And I'm talking about like depth of shade, dye ratios, acid and heat timing, and acid quantity, I suppose. And then there are certainly a bunch of other things that I don't even know that I don't know yet. Overall, this is way too much fun, and I'm definitely going to be doing it again soon. This will not be the last yarn dyeing video you see from me. It really feels like a cheat code. It feels like illegal knowledge. You will definitely see whenever I work these up into something. I will keep you updated on that, of course. I hope you enjoyed watching the process. Maybe we can all learn from my mistakes and my successes. So maybe I'll even do that. Maybe I will consider that. Who knows? So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for hanging out with me. And here's the giant dye pan I said I wasn't gonna buy. Okay, bye.